Good afternoon again. I'm Bernard Keevy. I just wanted to go through a 5-stage process or blueprint with you this afternoon, which we can all use, me included, to help us grow our business. And actually, if you follow this blueprint, you would double your bottom line profit and probably more. And you could well do it in less than a year. And in fact, you could really do it in 3 months, but that's probably not going to happen because most people won't actually implement things quickly enough, but it's certainly feasible. So here's the 5-stage process. The first thing you need is a strategy. You need to know exactly where you want to go with your business. So that means you need to get your head up, and we all do. We need to get our heads up and not be sort of concentrating on our daily activities and being busy. This strategy would be written out and it would reflect whatever our personal goals are. So, if we want to make more money and have more spare time from our business, then that would be part of our written personal goals and that would be reflected in our strategy. So taking on board that we have actually decided that we do want to grow our business and increase our profits, there's 2 fundamental things we need to get right before we can go much further. The first thing is we need to know what it is that we can present to the marketplace, if you like, that means that we have what we call a market dominating position. Now, this is sometimes described as a unique selling proposition, but there's slightly more to it than that, because a unique selling proposition means that we have something that's different to our competitors. But we need to also have something that appeals directly to our ideal customers or clients. Now, this is a fairly misunderstood concept, really, because a lot of people think that if they can identify what we call the demographics of an ideal customer, which is things like their age, their gender, their earning, where they live, the type of job they've got, the type of occupation, same thing, of course, they think that that constitutes, knowing what your ideal customer is. But actually, we need to know what's called their psychographics. And their psychographics is basically how they think. And actually, that is 90% of what we know. And the demographics that a lot of people think is what we need to know to identify our ideal customer, that only actually constitutes 10%. Now, what we mean by a hot button and, tying in with our psychographics is that generally, what motivates people to buy is that they've got an issue, a problem, or a concern that they need a solution to, and they haven't got that solution. So if we can persuade them that if they talk to us and deal with us, that we have a solution to that issue, problem, or concern they've got, and we've got a solution that no one else has got, or our solution works better than anyone else's, then that's what motivates them to buy from us. So it's a 2-pronged process. We need to know what is our solution for their major issue, problem, or concern, and we need to know who is our ideal customer and what is that issue, problem, or concern that we are offering a solution to. So once we've mapped that out, which obviously forms part of our strategy, the next really important stage, so that was stage 1, the second most important stage, it may even be the most important actually, is we need to set time aside to actually implement our strategy. Because where a lot of us go wrong is we might know what we want to do, but then we get wrapped up and busy in day-to-day activity. The phrase busy being busy, we have our heads down and we don't actually take time up to work on our business. These are all the things that if you read any of the sort of time management books, they refer to them as being important but not urgent. They're things that we have to do to develop our business and take it forward. But you don't necessarily have to do it in the next hour, the next day. So what tends to happen, or what can happen, is all the things with deadlines get done, even if they're not as important as these things. And we never get around to doing these things because they haven't got deadlines. So time management becomes really important, and what you need to do, what we all need to do, is to schedule time in our diary beforehand, before the week, before the month, and we need to actually put that time in there to actually implement the strategy that we've mapped out. Now, when we set that time aside, the third thing we need to do is to concentrate on what we call the 80-20 rule. Now, I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's always worth reiterating. 20% of what we do on any given day gets us 80% of our results, and actually 20% of the 20%, which is 4%, gets us 80% of the 80%. So basically 4% of what we do on a daily basis gets us 2/3 of our results. So it stands to reason that if we can plan our time accordingly and spend more time on the 4% of things, we could spend, say, 5 times as long on them, which would still only be 20% of our working week, and we would get, what's 5 times 2/3? We would get about 3 or 4, well, 3 times our results. So you can see that it's really important to manage our time and to set aside time to concentrate on the 20% of the 20% to get us the 80% of the 80%. So that's all very well. So what are those things? Well, what those things are, we need to actually have clear focus that what drives any business forward is 5 key variables. So this is the 4th stage. We need to work on making small improvements in 5 key variables. Now, the 5 key variables are, how many leads do we generate? Now, that straight away presents an issue for many of us, because do we know how many leads we generate? And do we know how many leads we generate from various activities that we undertake? And do we know how many leads we generate in different locations and in different sort of audiences and environments, etc.? So the more clear we are about knowing how many leads we generate, the better we'd be in a position then to actually make increases or improvements in that figure. Once we know how many leads we generate, do we know what percentage we convert into paying customers or clients? So that's the second bit. Now, if we know how many leads we generate and we know what percentage we convert into paying customers, that gives us our number of customers. Once we know that, we then need to know how often do these customers buy from us each year. So that's our number of transactions. And that tells us our volume, if you like, for the year. And then we need to know how much do they spend each time they buy on average, which will then tell us our turnover. And then once we know our turnover, do we know our gross margin, which basically says how much profit we make on everything we sell, which tells us our gross profit. And then if we take off all our other overheads, you know, things like fixed costs and costs that aren't directly associated with making and selling what we produce and sell, if we know that figure, we take that off and that will tell us our net profit. So these 5 variables here are crucial to any business. Now, this is where I said that we can easily double our profit, because if we focus on these 5 key areas, we only need to make 10% improvements in each of them. And the way it works generally with fixed overheads to come off at the end, generally, if we made 10% improvements in each of those 5 key areas, we would actually double our bottom line profit. And you could make those 10% improvements, you know, very, very quickly by focusing on doing so. So then you say, okay, so how do we go about making those 10% improvements? And that's where we move on to the 5th stage, which basically says that out of probably 100 odd strategies that I could point you towards, if you focused on 8 key ones, these would work for virtually any business. We reckon 95, maybe more % of businesses, these 8 strategies would actually achieve these, not only 10% increases, by the way, but far more than that, but a minimum 10%, which would double our profit. So these are the 8 key strategies. So the first one is advertising. Now, when I say advertising, I'm also talking about our websites, because most businesses have a website these days, and really a website is a form of advertising. And there's a formula we need to follow to get our advertising right. And if we do that correctly, that will make big differences to how many leads we generate. We can form joint ventures. Now, everyone knows that it's good to form joint ventures, but there's actually a strategic way of forming joint ventures with the right people to actually maximize, again, our number of leads. We could have what's called an upsell and a cross-sell, which basically means that 1/3 of the time when we sell something, we'll sell either something extra or something larger to our typical customers. Most businesses are aware of this, perhaps they've heard of it, but they don't really implement it. We could also have what's called a downsell. A downsell basically says that when someone doesn't or isn't willing to pay you the price you require for your main offering, rather than let them walk away, you have a lower value, lower price proposition, which means they will still engage with you and become a customer, which then means you can nurture them to become, you know, a higher paying customer eventually. We could have what's called a drip campaign, which effectively says we follow a typical prospect along what we call the buyer's journey, because at any given time, only 1%, possibly 3% of prospects are ready to buy now. The other 97% are split between 2/3 of them will buy at some eventual stage in the future, and 1/3 won't. So therefore, we need to target the 70% overall who will eventually buy from us. And we do that by providing them with information in the form of a drip campaign. And again, there's a proper way to do that. And if we did that correctly, that would make these big improvements we're talking about. We could also get away from competing on price and get away from discounting. And the way we would do that is we would say that instead of, say I'm a restaurant, instead of offering 20% off a meal, what I would say is, if you come and eat with us, then you'll get a free bottle of Prosecco, or you get free dessert or free starters and the value of these things will be worth more than a 20% discount to the customer, but less than that to us because we get them at trade prices. So we're adding on value rather than reducing margins by making discounting our prices. So that's called bundling. We could widen our product range, so we could have associated products and services that go with what we offer. Now, we don't have to provide them, because going back to joint ventures, that's another way of using our joint venture relationships, because we could actually recommend other associated products and services to what we offer, and maybe earn something from that in the form of exchange referrals from our referral partner, or in the form of things like affiliate fees, introducer fees, etc. And then the last thing we could look at is increasing our margins by looking at reducing our costs. So we can look at reducing both fixed costs, so things like energy costs, and then we could look at things like variable costs, such as material costs, components, etc. Maybe rationalizing which suppliers we deal with, maybe paying quicker cash terms to get extra cash discounts, etc. All of these things are areas in which we could look to implement them within our business to make these more than 10% improvements up here, which would more than double our profits. And for most businesses, it doesn't need to take a year. It could be done quicker than that. But say, to keep it conservative, let's say that all we'll do is make the 10% increases and we double our profit in a year. So that is my 5-stage blueprint, if you like, which will work for any business. If we implement that one step at a time, any business we will double our profits, and we will do it in well under a year. So I hope you found that sort of motivational, exciting and interesting. And if you thought it was interesting and worth sharing it, then obviously sharing it and liking it would be very much appreciated. So thank you for your attention. If you were interested in finding any more about any of these areas, or maybe getting some further information, then just message me on Facebook and I'll come back to you. Okay, thank you very much for your attention this afternoon. Hello, Neil. How are you doing? Exciting times. Speak soon. Cheers, Neil. Bye.